I'm Connie Elledge from Arlington, Iowa. I'm married to David.
And Brandon.
Oh, we've been married 33 years. We were high school sweethearts. We rode on the same bus together. And Dave didn't have a driver's license when we started going together to school dances, so he would ride his horse over to see me. And then he went to boot camp, and when he came home from boot camp, he gave me a diamond for Christmas. And then after the first of the year, he shipped out to Vietnam, and I waited for him, rode him every day.
And we were going on a mission, and he looked like he was 14.
I was only 12, to be truthful.
Which is where when I
do
saw him
look young, don't I?
You know, he said, Henry, go get the replacements. Are coming in on a truck, you know. And
Yeah.
I go, and these guys jump off, and then he jumps off and, you know, assigned us. And I'm looking at him, I'm thinking, why would they send children to me? You know, I don't get this. And so
we were smarter.
The Mekong Delta is completely flat as a pancake. If you look at a topographic map, there's not one line of elevation.
During the rainy season, it's just more mud. And during the dry season, the mud turns into concrete.
One day it just started raining. No thunder or lightning, just started raining, just like out of Forrest Gump.
One day, it started raining, and it didn't quit for 4 months. We've been through every kind of rain there is. Little bit of stinging rain, and big old fat rain. Rain that flew in sideways, and sometimes rain even seemed to come straight up from underneath. Shoot, it even rained at night.
The Mekong Delta is completely crisscrossed by canals, irrigation ditches, creeks, and little tributaries of the major Mekong River. You can't go more than, I would say, 100 yards in any direction before you come to some sort of water obstacle.
You can scuff your feet on the dirt, and water will fill up the scuff. You know, I mean, it's that the water level is that close to the surface.
Your clothes stayed wet all the time.
There was no place to escape the heat and no place to escape the mud.
Mud, water, more water.
Muddy dikes, rice paddies.
And it was just miles of it. Miles of rice paddies, palms, and bamboo.
Randy Reed. I'm married to Gary Reed, and we are college sweethearts. We've been married 34 years. Gary left. His birthday was the first birthday drawn, and so he went to Nam in '68.
The fire was so intense, and someone to this day, I don't know who it was, but someone called back, fix bayonets if you have them. And that gives me a chill right now to even say it.
It was Larry Enright on one side of the dike, and I was on the other side of the dike, and we were walking. And all of a sudden I saw him get, I swear, he got shot. Because he went down, I went down. He thought I was dead, I thought he was dead. And about 15 minutes later, we both peek up, and we're both alive.
The fighting was often like that in Vietnam. The enemy largely unseen, his casualties unknown. What Americans did know was that they were fighting a skilled and determined enemy. No one knew that better than the American commander, General William Westmoreland.
The VidCon is physically tough, mentally courageous. He gets an awful lot of mileage out of minimum resources. He can endure an awful lot of hardship. He's a good tactician. His time and space factors that come into play as he plans his maneuvers are professional. He executes these tactical maneuvers with a high degree of professionalism. He's cunning. He's an enemy to be respected.
That was a rough day that day, because we was going through that thick bamboo.
chopping through that, and then we got up in this little area. There's like a little tree line right in there, and I happened to look in there, and I seen something sticking up in the ground. And that's when I called back to CO. A rocket had hit right in the top of it right there and busted it, and it had caught, but it didn't go off. It didn't blow up. Or the CO sent a couple of guys over to check, make sure it wasn't booby trapped in that. You know, then we dug it all up in that. Now, toting that stuff out of there. You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Some SKSs, AK-47s, there were some M1s. There were 3 mortar tubes and bipods, and there was rounds. I can't remember how many rifles and all that was, but I know there's quite a bit of them.
It was a huge operation, and we were a small but significant part of it. The operation was an encirclement. The target was supposedly a North Vietnamese regiment. We were the part of the circle that was like the trap, and our job was to penetrate a tree line and walk to the blue, to the canal, and complete the encirclement.
CO had us all spread out, and then we started walking across the paddies and that, and I was walking point. And that's when I spotted all these Chi-Cons. They were ready for us.
Yeah.
And I swung around to tell everybody to get down, motion everybody to get down, and I was just started letting go, and that's when I got it in the leg. When I got it in the leg, when that round went in, you know, it tumbled, it flipped me up in the air. I turned about 3 flips in the air, and then I landed on the ground.
Once we got into position, we encountered some of the most fierce fire that I ever remember.
The VC were determined to keep that trap open so that they could escape.
Wild Bill, you know, tried to, he put a patch there, and then he tried to stuff this back here, but it wasn't no stopping the blood, so he did the best he could, and then we crawled on up to...
And why were you crawling?
We had to crawl.
Why?
You didn't want to stand up.
Why?
You'd been dead.
Okay.
I wanted to live.
So how far did you have to crawl?
It was 200 meters to get over to where they dusted us off in the helicopter.
They were machine guns and riflemen protecting machine guns, and we had absolutely no cover and very little concealment.
Across the wood line, on the opposite side, was another company, and the VC would fire at them. They would return fire, and we'd be receiving fire from that company and the Viet Cong at the same time.
It got real hairy there.
The only way that we survived is just by laying on our bellies and getting as close to the earth as you possibly can.
The Viet Cong had already started maneuver out of there. I'm sure this is what was happening. They had protected the machine gun positions. They'd moved those out of the way. They left some riflemen behind to secure the area while these guys made their escape. We started to maneuver in, and I'm looking at this wood line, which is now dark, just this dark wall.
And then having the F-111s come in and strike at night when, you know, visibility is really poor. And I was surprised by the courage of the VC, because that F-111 would come in with its lights off, and it would drop its load, and then it would pull up, and we could see its the flame in the jet engine, and then we could see green tracers going up aimed at that. And I thought, that determined little bastard, man, he is, you know, he's a brave man.
I'm looking at this wood line, which is now dark, just this dark wall, and there's a crack, and I see a white tracer come out of that wood line, and it went over my right shoulder, no more than 2 feet off my right shoulder, in the blink of an eye. And I thought to myself, well, that son of a gun, he was aiming at me, and he missed. And I kept thinking, later on I thought, you know, if he'd hit me, I would have seen the bullet that actually hit me.
That was one of the hairiest moments that I remember.
From what I understand years later is that they envisioned this as a great battle, and this was their chance to really put some hurt on the enemy, but it was ill-conceived.
The last I heard, Bernie said he was coming.
Yeah.
He told me he was coming.
Did he?
You said something about him going to Branson and making it a family vacation?
Well, you know what? Hey, he's probably really loaded.
Actually, he is.
So he's probably, yeah, he's probably got
loaded with money?
Yeah.
Oh.
He's probably down at the sheriff.
Unlike us who are just loading.
You know.
You were telling me earlier, Randa, that that Gary and Dave would share their letters.
Oh, yes. I was so embarrassed.
I was so embarrassed.
I was very naive, okay?
I was too.
And
I were the two last naive girls they made, probably.
And I would say things like, oh, Gary, I hope you get clean sheets once in a while. Sheets? What is a sheet? I sleep on boards on rice paddies. You know, very naive, very stupid, and I thought, and you share my letters with Dave. Oh my goodness, this is embarrassing. But you know, Gary and I saved our letters. And someday, when our kids are grown, they're 32, 30, and 28, when they grow up, we're going to let them read them someday.
When I first got in country, we had a monkey named Doc. And Doc would be there, and I don't know where he came from or who had him, who kept him, but he would go all around and he'd pick up cans of pop and start drinking pop, or it might have been beer for all I know. But I remember having my picture taken with Doc drinking a can of Orange Crush.
One of the Bronze Stars I got was for falling in a hole. Did I ever tell you that? I was on point, and I was still pretty green. And I was probably 100 yards out in front of everybody, and walking against all odds and regulations. I was walking on a paddy deck. And there was an old punji pit that had rotted out. It had been there for so long. But I didn't see it. And so I'm walking along, and I'm about 50, 60 yards from the tree line. And I step in this hole, and bang, I go down flat on my face, kind of like this. And there was an ambush. And they thought I seen him. Apparently, and so they opened fire. When I went down, they opened fire, and so everybody, so I saved everybody.
Another funny thing about On is it used to crack me up when he would cuss. I remember you go, "Damn motherfucker!" I'd laugh every time he did that.
We were out on a mission, and they called us and told us to find a clearing for choppers. And of course that usually meant bad shit, so we were just like, oh God, here we go. And so we get a clearing, pop smoke, choppers come and get us, and we fly and we fly and we fly, and we're all going, oh man, and we don't, nobody's told us anything. And we're going to Dongtan, and we're thinking, wow, what, and they land us on this road and march us into an auditorium, and it's a Bob Hope show. Nobody told us what was going to happen or anything. By God, they take us right up the front row, and we're in the Bob Hope show. It's no wonder people got screwed up there. I was like, here I am in the jungle, and I'm ready to get killed. Then they take me to Bob Hope show. Then they take me back out of the jungle,
The funniest story I heard this weekend was about Tarzan Peterson, who's passed on now, from Ed Bowen. He had me cracking up about Peterson's drinking and how he would get over on top and work deals out to get beer to us and stuff like that. Which is very, very true.
We were hunkered back into the side of a canal, and Green Tracer were chewing the water up. Literally chewing the water up, just about 2 foot away, and Elledge and Crabtree and I are back in there. And when I first arrived in country, Crabtree had talked about the pucker factor, and he explained to me what the pucker factor was, and the fact that an 8 or a 9, your rear end's puckered up here, it's really puckered up, but a real pucker factor 10, he says, you can't even get a straight pin up your rear, And so here they are, the 31st, they're chewing up the water there. Mortars are going off all around us. Guys are getting hit, and stuff's going off in the water, and it feels like they're punching us in the side of the impact concussion. And Crabtree reaches over and he says, 825. And I said, what's that? See what I mean about that pucker factor?
We haven't got our rations of our cigarettes and our beer, and we're supposed to get like a beer a day or some silly thing. And so I decided I'm going to write to my congressman, and so I wrote to Hubert Humphrey. And this chopper comes in, and it's this fancy-ass chopper. It's not like our choppers that are all beat up. This is just real pretty, sparkly, polished chopper, And comes in, and we're all kind of sitting there like with a visitation, from the heaven. And this guy gets off this chopper, and luckily the patties are relatively dry. And he's in his suit. He walks over to one of the guys on the end of the patrol, and somebody points to me, and he comes walking, "Are you Sergeant Enright?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I'm from Hubert Humphrey." And he's got a copy of my letter. And by God, they drop off cases of cigarettes and beer. Of course, we're on patrol. What are we going to do with all this shit? You know?
I could feel hot flames of fire roaring up my back.
Once a month, we would get kind of like a 2 or 3 day vacation.
You didn't have the pressure of carrying that heavy pack around all the time and carrying that rifle or that grenade launcher around all the time, and you could relax.
It was a time of fellowship. It was a time of kind of letting your hair down, relaxing.
It was usually a pretty rowdy affair.
If you could somehow go back in time, the Roman garrisons looked exactly the same. You know, the guys were playing horseshoes. You know, we had great games though. We had contact volleyball. I don't know if you played that. So you could take the guy out in the front row.
One of the platoons, I don't think it was our platoon, but they had they traded AK-47 that they had captured to the Navy guys. You know, it was probably John Kerry for a case of steaks, or for a bunch of steaks, so everybody in the platoon could have a steak. And then they had those 55-gallon drums that were cut in half and put on legs and filled with charcoal, and somebody would grill up the steaks, and we had a big salad that we got from the mess hall, and they would buy indigenous sourdough bread. And the Vietnamese learned sourdough when the French were there. And I remember going, boy, this is excellent sourdough and having a steak. And I thought that was a really good, relaxing moment, stand down in Dogtown.